Yeah, just joined again. Cool.
Can see you.
Great. I hope you are not trying to create any kind of scare, giving the viewers a taste of your stories. That's
I
some
think I need to do that because otherwise, without that, it will not be a very horror-like conversation.
exactly. Awesome. So I think we can start in another 30 seconds or a minute. Let more people join. Some have already joined.
Yeah.
And you are based out of Mumbai, I guess?
Yes, yes. This is very much Mumbai, and I'm in the suburbs of Mumbai, the part of Mumbai which is built haphazardly, and so
Right.
there is no planning here.
Right.
Wonderful to live, a wonderful vibe, but
Of course.
you know how it is. Where are you from? Is it
I'm from Delhi.
you're from Delhi? Okay.
Delhi. I've been to Mumbai a couple of times. I absolutely love the city. And especially when it's Delhi winters, I always remember Mumbai. It's one kind of a weather, and you don't have to, get into wearing all those woolen clothes and all. But otherwise, also, I really quite like the city of Mumbai.
I cannot tolerate the Delhi weather, the Delhi winter, especially.
It gets very cold, and summers also that's very
Yeah,
hot.
you can't even type, because when you type, your
Yeah,
fingers start to shiver.
it happens.
I
It
don't know
happens.
how you people manage that.
No, I know these are luckily it's just for 2 months. Now basically December to January, and we can say mid-February. But yeah, again, it's not at all easy. I mean, I haven't got habitual to the daily winter. I'm
Yeah.
living since I was born.
So my non-Mumbai friends that Mumbai has only one weather, and that is humid.
That is humid. Yeah,
There is only one season.
there's one season. That's true. All right, it's 5:03. I think we can start. So,
Yeah.
well, hello and welcome to another episode of Kitaabi Baatein. I'm Abhishek, also known as Books Wale Bhaiya, and my guest today is an author who actually needs no introduction. We have Neil De Silva, India's very famous horror writer. And let's hope we're going to have an interesting and who knows, maybe a bit spooky interaction today. So as I said, I don't think I need to introduce, but still for the uninitiated, here's a brief sketch of Neil. So Neil is a well-known name in the literary world. He published his first book, Maya's New Husband, in 2015. And in these 8 years, he has now got 12 books to his credit. He has been named as one of the top 7 Indian horror writers to be read by UK's Daisy Blitz magazine. His books have been listed on many prestigious book lists as well, such as Monster Complex and The Curious Reader. He has published with several leading publishers, including Penguin, Rupa, and Hachette. He's also been invited to speak at prominent literature fests across the country. Neil is also the president of India chapter of Horror Writers Association. Well, Neil, actually, to be honest, your introduction, I think, has run very long. As I was going through a website, we have too many things to read it. But I think it's important we get into the Q&A mode now. And I think my first question is actually related to introduction. So you also write a screenplay, you go as a judge in the events, you attend literary festivals, you yourself organize a literary festival. How do you manage to do so many things?
The first thing that you need to know when you're juggling between all these things is to inculcate that kind of discipline. It's also about time management. It's mostly about that. I think all of us can do a lot of things, but we do not manage our time properly. We do not know how to compartmentalize or slot our things into different things. So like Litventure, my Litfest, it concluded just yesterday, the 5th chapter of it.
Yeah.
So for this entire month of November, I did nothing but Litventure work. So it was just, we prepared from several months prior, but this one particular month was the month where we had to only focus on literature. So, okay, that is the way the Lit Fest happened. When I write my books, so I usually write multiple drafts at the same time. I have got like 4-5 projects going on, but they're never at the same state. So stage, I should say. So one of the books might be in planning. I'll still be writing the very broad strokes of it. The other book, I might be actually writing its first draft. A third thing, I might be actually editing, proofreading, because I think that is a kind of a relaxing activity for me. Yes. And maybe then other one is in pitching. So it's like in different stages. So what happens is when the books come out, there is a kind of a proper pipeline So because one after the other, the books keep coming out. Even now, you mentioned 12 books. So I have one more book that came out on Halloween this year. That is
Yeah.
Playthings.
Yeah, it's
So,
very much in my hands, and this is the best one.
so nice. Yeah, it's selling well, and this is my 13th book. So that's
It's
how it
13,
does.
sorry, yeah. 12 was including.
So right now I still have like three books to come out. They are still with the
Great.
publishers.
Yeah.
So two with Rupa, one with HarperCollins, which I have to still submit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is how I spread myself out. So it's not like I'm working all the time. That's quite a notion that's incorrect. In fact, I'm quite a lazy person. But the thing is,
Oh,
when I sit down to work, I try to focus myself on it and not, like fritter away the time. Also, when I
yeah.
write, this will also tie in with a horror talk later on. When I write, when I'm in the middle of some very hardcore, serious horror writing, I don't sit here in this comfortable room of mine.
Yeah.
So that time I just book a kind of a hotel room or something like that out of
Oh,
the city. I go to a remote place where the only thing that I can have easy access to is food. I I go there, I shut myself in the room, and most of the time I write. So that is how I write my horror stuff. I don't write it here. Here I cannot write horror. There is traffic noise. There are my children out
right.
there.
Of course.
Mind gets distracted. So yes,
Yeah.
that gives me a lot of productive work done. Because if I even go for 7 days, I can come back with the whole plotted outline of a new novel,
Correct.
which then I can come back here and write. So
And
that really boosts the kind of productivity for the whole year because I get a
the whole,
manuscript
correct.
plotted.
Right. So talking about your first book, I guess for any author, first book is something which is always special. So first published book was Maya's New Husband, and
New husband.
you would like to tell us a bit about that. How was the experience, and also how come you decided to be a horror writer?
Okay. So I didn't actually decide to be a horror author. It just happened. Okay, I'll tell you. So I wanted to write a book since long,
Mhm.
it was like bachpan se sapna tha, that kind of very romantic kind of thing. But then I had a coaching class and a business which took away 18 years of my life,
Okay.
making money, of course, but at the same time, I could not do anything creative like writing. I was like 39 when, that midlife crisis or whatever you say, that bug bit me that, okay, now I want to do something for my passion. And that
Right.
is when I wanted to write. So I was thinking of a story like, okay, if I write, what I'll write. Now, mind you, I am not from the publishing world at all. At least I wasn't at that time. I had no clue, no idea how to go about it. I did not know how a book is published. I did not know anything about it. How do you approach people like Penguin, HarperCollins, Hachette, and all? Nothing, no clue. But I did not even think about all those things. The only thing I thought about is I want to write a story. So where is the story? I looked around and I found a story. Let's not get into how I found it. I found a story. Something came to me. Something just hit my mind.
Yeah.
And that was the story of of Maya's new husband.
Nice.
The story of a woman who is married to a psychopath, who is a normal looking man in his daily life, but in the night he goes about killing
Yes.
people and cannibalizing them, very Dahmer style. So I had this story came to me, and I started writing it. Now, at that time, I had zero expectations
Mhm.
because I told you I was not from the writing world at all. So I was writing the story for myself. I was just writing for myself. And I was making it as brutal as possible, as gory, as unhindered. I did not think about anything. No need of filtration, sanitization, censorship, nothing. In my mind, as the story came, I just threw it on the paper. It turned to be so gory, so bizarre, so
Yeah.
twisted, so
Yeah.
demented, so deviated that I myself was scared of it at times. Like
Okay.
what is this I have written?
Yeah.
I could not write it in the nights. But then I finally finished writing it. I wrote it during the NaNoWriMo month of 2014. So I wrote the draft in 21 days. Utterly magical. Now I cannot do that. So I
Yeah.
wrote it in 21 days because there was no other distraction at all.
Right. Right.
And I published it on Amazon KDP.
Mhm.
I did not know publishers. So I had just found out by my researches on the internet that there is this thing called Amazon KDP. It's so easy, just put your book. So just for a lark, I did not even know Facebook at that time. So even
Okay.
Facebook account I had made just that year in the beginning,
Mhm.
and so I was complete ignoramus when it comes to social media. Anyway, I found out about this Amazon KDP and I uploaded the book. Somehow, I don't know how, call it a quirk of luck or twist of fate or whatever it is, the book hit number one on the next day. It was number one in the Amazon category. For a very brief time, it was also within the top 10 of all books category. And the book did really well. People bought it
Okay.
and people read it for how it was. The comments start coming, both kind of reviews, positive as well as negative. All of them help. The book went viral even in 2015. Going viral was a huge thing. We didn't have Instagram. It was
Okay.
only Facebook. So people used to take pictures with the book, post it, two-line reviews. So many people just took quotes of the book and post. So this is how it happened. Now you asked me how it became how it was a horror book. So I have been reading horror right from my childhood. In my
Okay.
house there was no kind of censorship at all. Like you cannot read this, you cannot read this. So things like Dracula, Frankenstein, the dark versions of the grim fairy tales, everything, all of that, I read as a child. And my dad used to translate movies, so I was also exposed to the Ramsey movies right from the beginning. There was nothing like, don't read this. So I used to read, I used to make my own decisions, like what I want to read, not what not. So horror has been fascinating me right from that age. And therefore, even when the story I wrote, it was very dark, it was very twisted. So when I had to upload it on Amazon, Amazon KDP asks you for categories. So I thought that the best category for this is horror.
All right.
So I put it as horror, and that is how it went in the horror category, and it became number one rank in horror. Then people
Okay.
started picking it up that okay, it's a horror book, and that's how I ended up being a horror author. Which I'm not complaining. I love writing horror, but at
Right.
that time, back then, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was no plan. There was no plan.
Right.
I'm an accidental author, horror author at least.
Right. And so as you mentioned, you read a lot of horror in your childhood and adulthood. Any other genres you like to read during your childhood or as a young adult, or
Anything and
to horror?
everything.
Anything
I
else?
was a I was a complete book hog. I used to
Oh,
read books like everything. There is nothing that I haven't read as a child. Of course, the Amar Chitrakata comics, the Tinkle
yeah.
comics, Misha, even Misha, which was a very rare Russian publication at that time. It used to come to my house. Then, of course, Asterix,
Yes.
Tintin, what have you. Everything was there. I had access to. What I
Mhm.
didn't have access to, I could go to the library and get.
And
Then
get
as
it.
I grew, we had libraries at that time, circulating libraries where you just
Yeah.
pay a little small token sum and you can get a book. Then I started reading the Enid Blyton books, Hardy Boys,
Mhm.
Three Investigators, all those things. As I became a little older, I graduated onto novels. And I read novels like, Jeffrey Archer was my perennial favorite. I started loving him. Agatha Christie, and things just went on from there. I read many of the obscure books also. I don't even remember their names. So I would just
Mhm.
pick up a book from my dad's collection and start reading. And
Okay.
a lot of those things were quite adult also at times. You know, I
Yeah.
either in theme or in the way that uh,
Like
their thought process
content
was.
and yeah.
Like I read The Fountainhead when I was maybe in ninth grade. I
Oh,
did
that,
not even I did not even understand like what
yeah.
half of it was.
Right.
But I read it at that time because it was there in my dad's collection, and then I had seen that a lot of people say Fountainhead is this big book that is a must read. Everybody must read.
That's yeah.
So I just once started reading, and those days we didn't have any distractions, right? There was
Right.
nothing, no phone, no this. So I was
No.
a lonely kind of a person with a
Yes.
book in hand. I was the happiest. So I read Fountainhead, and I read it very pretty quickly. I remember reading it in less than 4 or 5 days
Oh,
during
that's
some.
great.
I
I
didn't understand any of it back then.
But
So,
for a
but
ninth standard kid reading Fountainhead, it does mean something certainly.
and and finishing it.
Of
I
course.
actually reached till the end page of it. So yes, so I was surrounded by
Mhm.
books. The horror
Right.
books that I read at that time, they were Dracula, Frankenstein, of course. Everybody reads them. There were a lot of Roald Dahl books.
Yeah.
Some of the Roald Dahl stories are very, contorted in their own way. So then there's many books which dad had of horror collections, small
Yeah.
short stories collections, and of course the my guru, I say, Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
I discovered him quite by accident. So Edgar Allan Poe's one of his short stories was in those anthologies. So
Yeah.
that was the Telltale Heart. I would say reading the Telltale Heart was the turning point in my life. So that
Okay.
was maybe seventh, eighth grade, that period only. So I happened to read the Telltale Heart. I
Mm-hmm.
was so moved by the story. If you see the story again, I mean, I don't know how much you remember, but
Mm-hmm.
there is no mention of characters' names. There
Right.
is no background. There is
Yes.
nothing like where these people are coming from. There's just this one scene, a murder that takes place. Then the person buries that person within the house itself on the floor. And then it's all about the guilt of the person.
Negative.
The police
Right.
arrive. When the police arrive, this person is so overwrought by his own grief that he ends up confessing to the crime. It's such a
Yes.
small, simple thing, but Edgar Allan Poe has woven his magic all over the place,
Correct.
and every word of it is so beautiful. I mean, I wanted to understand more about this sick man who wrote this book, and I was quite enraptured by that entire gothic environment that was created. So from there I started reading a lot of gothic stuff, a
Oh,
lot of
okay. Great.
gothic, and that was what fascinated me, like Haunting of Hill House, uh, Picture of Dorian Gray, Dr.
Yeah.
Jekyll and Mr.
Right.
Hyde. No, yeah. So all these things I started reading, and I started getting more and more into it. Like, how do these worlds happen? How by just words can you create a fear that subsists like even 100 years after you write it?
Correct. Absolutely.
It's nothing. It's just sentences. It's just
Mhm.
words.
Yes.
But today we read it 100, 150 years later, and we are shaken. Even today we are
Yes.
scared to touch those pages which
Of
have
course.
words in them. That's it. That's magic.
That's
How
magic.
can you do that? How can you do
Correct.
that? So these thoughts as a child I had, and then of course that was where I decided that okay, I also want to write something like this. I also want to create this kind of magic. And one of my things that I never told anybody, but I really wanted, was to have my name to a book, like
Okay.
how have my name on a book. That's it. That was what I wanted, and that book should be in some store or something. In fact, I was so weird that even in that time I actually type wrote books. I had a
Mm.
typewriter at home. I typed
Okay.
books,
Oh,
bound
wow.
them bound
Yeah.
them with dhaga and all that, made
Oh,
drew
great.
cover pages, shared them among my friends with my name on it. So I used to do that. I still have a couple of those very basic things lying around.
That's
So
great.
finally, yeah, I have published books now, but this is where it began. So it's not like an overnight thing for me.
Right. So I think I was actually going to ask that, as a horror, did you choose horror or horror chose you? But I think it's like it's both ways, and probably, yeah, horror
Yeah,
did chose you as you
more
kept
horror
on.
chose me.
Right. Because it's a little unusual for a school kid to take that much interest in horror. Because I remember when there was a day I was watching a Ramsey Brothers movie, and my mom suggested me not to. That तेरे को डर लगेगा रात को. Don't watch this movie. So coming to that, for like there were like of course students like you who took a lot of interest in reading horror, but I think in India, horror was introduced to the masses through the movies. And I think Ramsey Brothers are, of course, you can say, are the pioneers in that. And I
Hmm.
think that made the genre popular. And of course, then we had good writers. We have like Hari Kumar, we have Anita Kishanji, who are writing very good stories. So, but I think in the case of India, it was definitely through cinema, and especially through Ramsey Brothers, that people started liking, these movies. And they have their own stories, actually, Ramsey
Yeah,
Brothers. And in the
yeah.
past few years, a couple of books have been, even published on that. And so one more thing. So one thing which made popular horror was Amsterdam, and I think is Bhangar. So I think
Hmm.
when you talk of horror in India, these two things will automatically pop up. Either it's some Ramsey Brothers movie and or Bhangar. And you also wrote a story about Bhangar,
I
wherein
did.
you did, and anything you want to share about that. Let's add some thrill to the
So,
conversation as well. How was that? Your visit
so
to?
uh, I think India has got a long history of
Yeah,
horror writing as well as horror in cinema and all.
in
We
cinema.
don't we don't realize it because we don't talk about it a lot. But horror is
Yes,
there everywhere.
everywhere.
If you even see stories from our ancient books, there are stories of demons and rakshasas and
Yes.
pishach and so many
Yeah.
of them. Even in the epics, you will find a
You
lot of these mentions.
Yes.
So we have these horror elements always. What Ramses did in the 80s when they began was that they took our very supernatural monsters and
Yeah.
ghosts and they put them in Havelis and
Yeah.
Viranas and dark
Yeah.
bungalows. So we Indians love two things in horror, even now. Number
Even
one is who is the monster?
the
We love
monster.
this. We want to always see monster kaisa dikh raha hai and kya hai and what is the look, what is the appearance. We love that. Second thing that we love is the location.
Location.
Horror
Yeah.
kahan ho raha hai? Is it
Oh,
in a Haveli? Is it in a hotel? Is it in a hospital? So we are very much tied up with that location
true.
aspect of it.
Yes. True. True.
How much? So what Ramses did in their stories was to combine both those elements.
Yes.
They just imagine putting a beast in a Haveli.
In a
First of
Haveli.
all, a Haveli is so spooky for us to enter. And
Yes.
secondly, you have got this very grotesque looking beast with his hands melting and all like that they used to show. Yeah. So that kind of thing was the best juxtaposition of the elements that we want.
Absolutely.
Some of the movies, horror movies that India had, not Ramsey movies so much, had fantastic music also.
Music.
So we
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
music.
Oh, of course.
We have music in our blood. And if
Right.
you have horror movies like Mahal and all, the
Yeah.
songs by Lata Mangeshkar ji,
Yes.
those kinds of songs you put in like 20 Saal Baad, the very moment that tune comes, wrongte khade ho jate, so
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
we have that kind of magic to create all these things and
Correct.
put it together as a kind of a package, which we did. Horror has been there in India, not just in cinema. This is the cinema we are talking about,
Yeah.
but it is there everywhere. Like you, I grew up talking horror stories with my friends. We have all done that. As teenagers, we would just sit around in the building, garden, bench, kahin bhi, and then just discuss. अरे उधर भूत है, ये जगह है ना खुफिया है, हॉन्टेड है, इधर नहीं जाएगा, वो कब्रिस्तान के पास मैंने कुछ देखा था सफेद साड़ी में. So that kind of stories are all over, and we
Yeah.
actually enjoy telling horror stories, all of us.
Exactly.
Our dada dadis also, no, they used to tell us stories which were slightly horror stories only. What were the stories of those, बाहर मत जाना, वो चुड़ैल आएगी, पकड़ लेगी, 11 बजे के
Yes.
पहले सो जाना, 9 बजे के पहले सो जाना, all those things. Horror stories only. I heard a lot of horror stories from my grandmother. So, these kinds of things have come to us from anywhere. Then, the other element that we have are all these, the locations that you mentioned. You mentioned Bhangad.
Yes.
Now, Bhangad is, of course, one of the most haunted, at least by its reputation. It is the most haunted location. Actually,
Yeah.
Bhangad is very tame. When you visit it, it's just a kind of a fort, ruined fort.
Yeah. It's just ruins.
And yeah, it's an archaeological survey site. So, it's protected and all. And because it's an ASI site, there is a notice put up that don't be here after 6 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is why people get more scared of it.
Yeah.
Because why
I
is the
agree.
notice there? The notice is, and yeah. So the same way we have other locations.
Yes.
So there is Kuldhara. If you know about
Kuldhara.
Kuldhara is also in Rajasthan. It's a
Yes.
village that around 175 years ago, overnight, it was emptied out. Means there were people living there, tribal kind of a community. But overnight, 175 years back, this village completely, people just went. Second day, means next day, if you there was nobody there. And what is the secret of this village? Nobody knows why people went. Of course, there is
Right.
this story that there was a tantric, he put a curse, and because of that, the people started dying and they left. He had fallen in love with some of the local girls and all that. But today, if you go to Kuldara, you will see really amazing stuff. Like there are houses there, but they don't have roofs. Why do they not have roofs? What is the secret? So that is one thing. Kuldhara also I have captured in one of the books that is haunted, by the way, by
Yeah.
Jayalani. You go to the north, Missouri, there is a mines,
Yes.
called as the Lambi Dehar mines. Now the
Yeah.
Lambi Dehar mines, this story really shook me when I heard it. It's true. The story is that Lambi Dehar mines was built during the British times as a mines,
Right.
So it is a limestone ka mine. But how it was built was the British officer, he happened, there, it is on a hill. The mines is on a hill. On that hill, only one woman, old woman, used to live in a jhopda. So a British officer happened to visit her house for some reason. Maybe he got lost or something, and he found that one house. He went there, and that was where we discovered that there is limestone in this under this mountain, under this hill.
Yeah.
So what he did overnight, he made the woman shift her house, and he made started the construction of the mines.
Yeah.
So the woman then just went away. She protested, cried, and all. Then she went away. Then she never came back. Now, what happens is when the mine started, the workers started seeing the woman again, that she comes. And now the secret is like how she comes. They thought that she had died and gone.
Yeah.
But now, after many years, she started coming back again when the mine started working, became operational. So the woman would come, and there was all this mystique about her, like where she comes from, where she goes, nobody knows. Then one day, the mines, there was a terrible accident. And that terrible accident was when the workers were inside the mine, the mines got closed, sealed, and all the workers got trapped. Everyone died. This is very recent, in fact. This is just in the 90s or something like that. The reports say that around 20,000 miners died in that. 20,000. Unbelievable stuff. 20,000 miners died. And just before they died and all, they had begun seeing that woman again. So, and this is like around 200 years later. The mines are there since very long. So how did this happen? So what is the curse behind this? So these mines today, they are open. They are not operational. They are not working as mines, but they are open. You can go inside. If you go inside, you will get a terrible, terrible vibe. Terrible vibe. Like there is, when my friend Jayalani went there, whose stories I wrote in the book, he actually saw a huge beast-like creature following him all through the mine. Only a shadow it was, but the shadow would not go, and from where the shadow came. Very scary. So then in Orissa, I heard of a story of a tree which is known as the suicide tree. It's outside a village, a suicide tree, and young men would just, without any provocation, without any reason, would get up in the middle of the night, walk to the tree, and hang themselves. I'm talking about very, strong young men who had no reason to kill themselves at all. Would just die. So this was called as the suicide tree. It was on the outskirts of the village.
Right.
And I forget the name of the village. It's in the book. The spirits talk to me.
Yeah.
So the paranormal teams, when they went to investigate the tree and they started their work, they found a lot of energies trying to stop them from finding out anything about the tree.
Yeah.
It was like, the wind started moving fast, and this is the middle of the night. And the tree started, it looked like it had some kind of energy within it. So these kinds of stories are happening around us, which we know, we talk about it in hushed whispers. Some of us, like me, put them in books. But I'll tell you, the legacy of horror in India is very rich, very immense. We have these stories everywhere. Go to the south, you have stories of yakshis and all, the demigods and all. I can go on and on, but let's have the other question going. Yeah.
Of course, these legends are around everywhere. Coincidentally, I also visited Bhangar last year itself. And I think there's some network issue at your end. Yeah. Am I audible to you?
I can see you clearly. I can hear you as well.
I think you're I think now it's fine. So I also coincidentally visited Bhangar only last year. It was just an impromptu plan. I was in Rajasthan, and we just all of a sudden decided to I was with my wife and my son, and fortunately nothing happened. But there was some vibes. You can say these places do carry some vibes wherein you don't feel like spending too much time. I went in daytime, of course. In night, it's a big no. And I remember, so some rural guy was wearing a turban like this Rajasthani people do. And he came and he said that, I am the guide, मैं आपको सारी कहानी बताता हूँ. And then someone else came and said, I am the authorized guide. Look, I have this I card as well. And they started fighting a bit, and we met with a Delhi family from Delhi itself, and we thought, okay, we'll Dutch the expenses of the guide, and I was just telling him, what if this guy is actually a ghost and not the guide? And you
Happens
start
possibly.
thinking in those terms, because and tomorrow if you ask that, no,
Yeah.
there was no guide, who that turban wearing guy, oh, he has been roaming around every time. Yeah.
So
So yeah,
in
all
Kuldhara,
these,
when yeah, go on, go on.
so
There
all
was
these
some
places do
network.
carry some vibes, and you actually start thinking like that.
So this is what I believe is the spiritual
Yeah.
energy, like the latent
Right.
spiritual energy. See,
Yeah.
we are human, right? We are living right now. So our bodies are composed of two things, basically. One is the matter, that the cells, bones, and all that you can see. But then there is also some force that is guiding us in the way that
Yeah.
we are, Like there is
Of
something
course.
which we call as the Atma, to simplify it.
Yeah.
Now, Atma is a very simplified term. But what
Yeah.
is this Atma? Nobody knows. Can you describe an Atma? I cannot. Whether you call it Atma, soul, spirit, we cannot describe.
No,
We
no,
just
true.
know that, okay, there is this. But then how is this Atma of mine different from yours? How is our personality
From
different?
yours.
This is all coming from the
Right.
energy that we have. I believe that when we die, it is the matter that decomposes. But what happens to this guiding force that makes us human? How can
Right.
you cannot say that what happens to it? So that is where the whole concept of the afterlife
Yeah.
begins. Whether you call it
Correct.
afterlife or you call it, there are so many terms in so many religions. So
Right.
what is that? That is what we horror authors try to explore.
Right.
That is what these paranormal investigators try to explore. So I think places like Bhangad, Kuldhara, Lambi Dehar that I told you about,
Yeah.
Vasvilla, Mayong, these all places, they are somewhere wrought in tragedy. There is a
Yes.
lot of tragic uh, stuff that happened. When the
Yeah.
people went away, those energies, those negative energies of those people somewhere stayed within those places. It
Correct.
also happens when there is a small apartment, like where people just, somebody dies. For a few days, you do feel something off
There's
about the
something like that.
place.
That's
We
true.
believe that it is our mentality,
Yeah.
mental thinking, it's our psychology we think, but it cannot be all psychology. There is
Correct.
something within that place also, which is an energy, which is a vibe, which is what
Yeah.
we are
Of course.
talking about.
Of course.
I'll tell you something. See, we go to somebody's house, somebody who we have never met before. We go to that person's house, but the moment we enter that house, right, we understand that मुझे यहाँ आके अच्छा लग रहा है या बुरा लग रहा है. You
Yeah.
get that feeling.
Yes.
Immediately you get that feeling.
Immediately.
Why does that
Yes.
happen? So some houses have a very welcoming vibe. Come in, come in.
Welcome.
Even I'm not talking
Exactly.
about the people, I'm talking about the space itself.
Space itself.
Whereas some places, they just like repel you.
Yes.
This may be, whether you talk about Vastu, Feng Shui, or whatever, I'm not talking about those things, but I'm talking about just the basic elemental attraction
Exactly.
that you might have to a place. This can be for an office also. You take a
Ah,
new
absolutely.
job, you immediately know that, okay, this job mein yahan tikunga ya nahi tikunga, you come to know.
You know,
So this is what I call as vibe. It may not be
I
very
think,
always
yeah.
ghostly, but it is an
Yeah.
aura.
I think many MNC guys would correlate to what you just said. That in the office you get those vibes, but tikunga ya nahi. Especially as people those who worked in organizations since long and all. But so let me come to your latest book. So you talked about the Fearless 4 paranormal thriller. So are we finally going to see an Indian version of something like the famous 5 or Hardy Boys? Is this going to be the start of the famous 4 of from India? Are we going to see something like that in the future?
That's the plan, of course. We hope to make it
Yeah.
kind of a series at the end of the day. So this is like, yeah, it is modeled on the famous 5 and all those Secret 7,
Yeah.
the 3 investigators. We
Yeah.
grew up reading all these books
Of
where a
course.
couple of kids come together and they investigate. So the
Right.
tadka in this is, in my book is Playthings. The tadka is that the investigators are investigating horror stuff.
Honest.
So there is, yeah, it is not just a detective mystery, but it is a horror
Yeah.
mystery. So they are crazy
Right.
kids. One of them is a
Yeah.
muscle man who will fight, One of them is the kind of a leader, boss who actually thinks and does things. And one of them is the research guy. One of them is the social
Yeah.
media girl. So all
Correct.
these four of them, when they come together, they start a detective agency. It's a paranormal detective agency, and their motto
Paranormal.
is that we do not disbelieve anything till we don't have proof. So that is
Right.
the kind of motto that they start with, and they get all these ghostly cases which they start solving. So the case in this book is about toys which have
Right.
started coming alive, and they are attacking the children, the owners,
Right.
and that too not when they are children but when they are grown up. So your childhood toy has come back to haunt you. Imagine that, scary stuff for me at least. So that is the premise of the story. The
Right.
Why are these toys coming back, what is the wrong with them, and these children start investigating. So Playthings has become a hit. I
Yeah.
will, because it is also on the bestseller list, and even at the Mumbai airport, I was very happy
Yeah.
to see that it was on the top 10 and all.
Uh,
So Playthings became a good book for us, and now we are actually making a series of it. So I have been asked by the
Okay.
publishers to propose some ideas for more stories around the
Right.
Fearless Four. So I have some couple of concepts in mind. We are working, and hopefully we will not be late on this, because Puffin is a wonderful publisher, and
Mhm.
we work on very beautiful deadlines. So what
Right.
happens is everything comes in a kind of a streamlined manner, and it's a fun thing for me to write for children. So I enjoy
No.
that.
You also wrote a short story as well, in which it was about a toy. I'm forgetting the name of the story, but it had a somewhat similar idea of there was something wrong with the toy, and there were two brothers, and I'm
Yeah,
forgetting the name. Uh, but it was idea was somewhat, the theme was
correct.
similar. Yeah.
So I have a thing with toys.
Ah, okay.
When I was in, like very small, like 12, 13 and all. My grandmother was abroad. She
Hmm.
used to work abroad, and whenever she used to come to India, that time, like when she used to come, she used to bring this huge collection of toys
Ah, okay.
from there. Because here in India, we were not so well to do. We were a very middle class family. But when my grandmother used to come, she was the rich one. So she used to bring all these toys and all. And then I used to play with the toys for the next 2 years till she would come again. So these toys, I would play repeatedly with them. They would break.
Nice.
I had a doll whose eye was out, whose limb was out, correct? Torn teddy bears, all those the kinds of things were the toys that I played with as a child. I could not throw them away because I did not have access to new toys till the time my granny came again. And I
Right.
had also this attachment grown. So I played with those toys, and those toys actually, I'll tell you, they looked ugly. They looked
Mm.
horrible. But still, because I had a kind of attachment to them, I played. When I grew up and I went to my collection again and I saw, and I was like shocked, like, okay, these were the things I was playing with. These are
Yeah.
so ugly. These are
Yeah.
so scary. So, from that time only, this idea of playthings has been
Yes.
in my
And
mind, yeah,
right.
kind of thing like that.
I seem to remember there was some movie in Hindi movie, Khilona Bana Kal Naya Kiya, in which
Yeah, the
Arjun
Karishma
Simmons
Kapoor.
and Lakshmikant Berde was that. I think
Yeah,
unfortunately passed away at a bit of a
yes,
young age.
yes.
And I remember, so those, I just saw few scenes, I felt scared. And
Very
I remember
scary.
my paternal aunt's house, there was some old toys of my cousin's sister because she had moved to US. And after that, whenever I visited her house, I had to make sure I won't enter into that room. Because
Hmm.
those toys always reminded me of that scary scenes. There were no
Yeah.
toys, and pata nahi kya ho jayega and all. So yeah,
See,
as I said,
even now,
yeah,
like
go
I
ahead.
cannot sleep. Even now, I cannot sleep with a teddy bear in the room or something like that. I
Right.
cannot. I'm not scared
That
of lots of stuff, but I don't want a teddy bear in my room.
anyway.
Yeah. So yes, this was also Child's Play. I'll refer to Child's Play also,
Mm.
the movie series, Hollywood movie
Yeah,
series. That also has a like scary doll clown attacking
yeah.
kids and all. Yeah. Yeah.
Even it also had by Stephen King also had this clown.
It
Thing.
also had that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was not a toy
So
clown, but yeah. Hmm.
no, not a toy, but a clown was
Yes.
it? So.
Yes.
So coming to again your books, I also noticed in within horror you have introduced a lot of variety in the sense you wrote
Yes.
novels, you wrote short stories, you wrote trilogy. in one of the your short story, it was more like dialogue based, and instead of narration, you focus more on the on the dialogue part. So again, how you manage to bring this much of variety instead of say writing on only one type, that okay, I only write short stories or novels. How do you manage to get so much
So
variety?
horror has a lot of variety. It is a very misinterpreted and misunderstood genre. The reason is that people in India, at least the average horror viewer, thinks that horror is just about Havelis and Chudels.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it is not like that. A lot of us new age writers, as I say, we are exploring a lot of new kind of horror writing,
Exactly.
which we do through our works, and we try to speak about these things whenever we get the chance. So even when I sit down to write a story, I think of something new to do, because otherwise it is boring to write the same kind of story again. So I write horror within its different subgenres. I try to capture the essence of it, so that finally when I have a like collection, there will be lots of different kind of material for people to read. So I
Yeah.
don't want to be an author like who has the same kind of material. You write 50 books, but all the 50 books are the same kind of stories with a little bit of change. That's not what I want to do. So just to give you a few examples, when I wrote Maya's New Husband, that was the story of a human psychopath.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
more about horror within the mind. So, like human horror. It does not
Yes.
really have any ghost or spirit in it, not in the first book at least.
Right.
When I wrote Yakshini, that was more about supernatural horror.
Supernatural.
Horror that comes from our mythology, from our fables, from our folklore, because Yakshinis are demigods. Yeah?
Yeah.
So there's a strong mythological connection to Yakshinis. Yakshinis
Yes.
are all protected by Kuber, who is the brother of Ravan. So there is actually that mythological bit within it. So I
Yes.
tag Yakshini as a supernatural mytho thriller. So that is the kind of thing. Then I wrote Right Behind You, the book that you referred to.
Yeah.
Right Behind You is this collection of 13 stories,
Certain story.
where the first story was an urban legend, Teen Mundi.
Yeah.
That is,
Teen
Teen Mundi legend was actually there in Mumbai. I was pretty scared when it started. Like, Teen Mundi की चुड़ैल घूमती है, रात को 7 बजे के बाद बाहर रहोगे तो वो आके तुम्हें खत्म कर देगी. So, actually in 1996 this happened, and people before 7 o'clock they would go in the house and shut down. They would never come out, and anybody knocks, they would not open the door. This was just as bad as the Naleba legend in Bangalore, on which the movie Stree was based, O Stree Kalana. So
Yes.
we had that in Mumbai as well. So in Right Behind You, the last story is like on chat. The one that you said is through dialogues.
Yes.
So that was through chat. That is a real life
chat.
experience, by the way, Abhishek. So that I was chatting with a friend from Malaysia, and she had this problem, a paranormal problem, and she was telling me about how a spirit is behind her and not leaving her. She was telling me the story about it, and it was like 12 in midnight par ho chuka tha, and still I was so engrossed in the story. I was talking to her, she was messaging, I was messaging, and at a point she just shut down. Like, she stopped. She was not talking anymore. And just before that, she had told me, no, Neil, I'm very scared now. I don't know whether I should tell you further, because I'm feeling that that thing is listening to us and is trying to come to me. Aisa sab bolkar, then she suddenly stopped talking. So for 15-20 minutes, she was not there. And at that time, we didn't have phones and all, like, only internet chat was there. So I did not know how to contact whether she is good or not. Then she comes back, and after many, many minutes, and she says, okay, it's fine. I just had a big scare and all. So that story came from there. That story.
Okay.
So it's a terrifying experience. I went through that. So yeah, I was telling you about the subgenres. So then there is horror comedy also, which has now come like as a kind of thing. So I'm going to write a horror comedy soon. I'm actually working on it.
All right.
There is a horror gore, the very other extreme side of it, which is all about slashing and cutting and blood. So that is disgust horror, right? So I'll have all these kinds of. I want to do that. I want to explore horror fantasy. I've already explored horror for children. So this is how I do it. This is how I do it. I do not want to write the same kind of story a lot. I want to give people different experiences. Of course, there's paranormal, which I did not mention. Paranormal horror is the horror of ghosts and spirits, the horror that comes from dead people who have gone. Now, the beauty of paranormal horror is that it can be sweet also, because I have heard from people a lot of stories about ghosts of their relatives, their fathers, grandfathers, uncles, who came back and actually helped them in some way. So a lot of our ancestors, they do come back to help us. So that is the
Right.
sweet horror, the good
Yeah.
horror. So paranormal has a good side to it as well. So
Of
I,
course.
I, I want to capture those stories as well.
That's really good. I guess, yeah. I mean, I understand your point of the sub genres and how you can make actually this genre more interesting instead of having one kind of story every time. Of course, people
Hmm.
do get bored out of reading the same stuff again and again. So, and I think a lot of some of your books are now being made into movies or
Yeah.
OTT platforms. So, how about that experience? Seeing your book into movie or a web series, and are we going to see more of your books into web series or movies?
Yes. So yeah, that's happening. It's a process. I'm not
Yeah.
actually like, too keen on that because I basically identify myself as a novelist. So I'm
Mhm.
happy to create my stories and then just give the book to the producers and channels who are interested and
Yeah.
let them make what they want. I will be involved in the creation process. So Maya's New Husband has gone
Yeah.
for a screen option.
Yes.
Yakshini has gone, Haunted has gone. So these all books are in talks. I'm also writing stories, original stories for certain shows that are coming up. So I'm more
Oh.
interested in those because those are not based on my books. They are new stories which you will see for the first time on screen straight away. So I'm working with a major channel on one of the stories that has horror like from different parts of India, actual real
Oh.
life horror that people have gone through. So for your audience also, I'll say if you have actually gone through a horror experience, feel free to tell me. We are trying to take it for a major series that is coming up on
Oh,
an
wonderful.
OTT. We are developing it. I'm the writer for it, so I'm collecting horror stories from all over the place. So yeah,
That's.
so this is the kind of stuff I do. I like writing books.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, I like writing books because that experience is very fulfilling and rewarding. And a book is your baby, right? When you write for
Of course.
when you write for screen, maybe there is a bigger scale. When you write
Right.
for screen, but then there are lots of people involved, so it is not completely
Right.
entirely your vision.
Exactly.
So, so yeah, yeah,
Yeah, of course, at times maybe the story you have to modify a bit just to make it suitable for
yes.
a movie or an OTT platform, whatever. So,
Like when Yakshini we were adapting for a particular channel, when we were adapting Yakshini, a lot of elements had to be put in. And that happens to every kind of book. Because, when you write a book, you are writing from a very strict POV.
yeah,
You are the
right,
character. But when you are going to show it on screen, there are going to be so many other characters. There's going to be a
right,
world, visuals. So therefore, your POV becomes larger
right,
when it goes on screen. So what happens is a lot of authors don't understand this. A lot
right.
of authors are very rigid, like don't change my book, don't
Mhm.
change my characters. But what I understand is that books and films are two different
Two
mediums,
different things. Correct.
and both of them have their own way of storytelling. So I am an author. I understand books better. I write books better. Though I now write for screen, that's a different thing. But I understand books better, which I will say, I'll admit. But when it goes to screen, I would love an expert to take charge of it,
Right.
like a director, the DOP, and all the other people involved. Let them do it. I'll give them the story. But then telling the story is their kind of thing, right? They
Yes.
are experts at it.
Yeah,
I will
experts.
never be able to direct a movie because
Right.
though I see my scenes visually when I'm writing a book, directing is a whole different ball
Different
game,
ballgame. Yeah, that's true.
which I will not be able to do. Yeah, so I
Right.
know my limits. I work within those.
That's great. So one last question before I open it for the audience, and they can. So all those you want to ask Neil anything. I already see some questions, and we'll soon take up that. But all of those who want to ask anything, please write in the message box, and I will take it up with Neil. So Neil, the last question is: any advice for aspiring writers?
I always say to every aspiring author, be honest to yourself. Be honest to the story that you're telling. Don't try to fall prey to any kind of gimmickry. Don't think that okay because ये book चल गया तो मेरी book भी मैं वैसे लिखूंगा तो अच्छी चलेगी. Because in the literature world, this kind of wannabe stuff does not work. Even in the romance genre, it has stopped working now. You
Right.
cannot write another romance book and people will just take it up. So it's like that. So be unique. If you
Yeah.
see, historically speaking, the books that have really broken trends are those that have been different from the
Right.
books that came before them.
Correct.
Whether it is To Kill a
Yeah.
Mockingbird, which spoke about racism and
Yes.
all that, or
Yes.
it is Cain and Abel, which was about two brothers in two different countries, or it was J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter,
Harry
which was
Potter.
about a boy wizard, which was a completely different story. Never seen anything
Correct.
before like that. All Agatha Christie's mysteries,
Yeah.
solving mysteries by me. Or to be very humbly, I'm saying even my Maya's New Husband. Why
Yeah.
it worked because there was no other book on the scene like that.
Same. Correct. That's true.
The Indian reader had not seen cannibalism so mainstream,
Yes.
right? And that too,
Of
Aghori
course.
culture being spoken about like it is a commonplace daylight
Oh,
topic. So
yeah.
that was not seen. So that book, because it gave the readers such a unique new experience, that is why
Experience.
Maya's New Husband became such a sleeper hit. And
Right.
people still talk about it. It's a cult book. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Like
Of course.
after 8 years, also people remember the book. It's still ranking. So I
Absolutely.
think the honest thing to do is just write the story you want to tell. Don't fall prey to, or don't be very, like taken over by all these writing workshops and writing advice and all that stuff. Writing is an art that comes from the heart, and it
From the
has to be that way. Write your story the way you want to write it. If you want to break down the three-act structure, you don't want to have dialogues in your book. You don't want character arcs to go in the way that YouTube writers talk about. Do it. Change the format. There's only one rule in writing, and that is there is no rule in writing.
There's no rule in that. That's true.
Just write, and your book will, if you have written it with honesty, the book will find its readers.
Correct. So that's definitely was some food for thought,
To
and we'll
to
take
to
on the
to also just give a last thing. I
yeah,
wrote
please.
horror at a time when nobody was writing horror.
What is writing? Correct.
So, a lot of people told me that तू writer क्यों बन रहा है? First and foremost. Secondly, writer बन रहा है तो horror क्यों लिख रहा है? कोई नहीं लिख रहा है इंडिया में. But the thing is, I did what I wanted to do, and because everybody has their space, that was my space. It worked for me. So, like how they say, mochi bano to bhi sabse pehla number one mochi bano.
Number one mochi bano. True.
So
No, that's absolutely true. You have to follow your passion and follow your talent as well. What you are good at and what you think you can do well. Awesome. So now we open for the audience, and I think there are a few questions already. So one is by Krish Ganga. Why are there mostly school goers in Lit Venture? I think this is your Lit Fest.
Yeah, he's asking about my Lit Fest. So Lit Venture is a school event. We have done it for the school students so that, to inculcate the art of reading within them. Right. So that is why we have brought a lot of, we send invitations to the school children all over Mumbai. And yesterday when we had Lit Venture, like 17 schools attended. So I think there were more than that. Even some of them came from as far as Nasik. So they attended. And that is why there were so many school students. It is a school fest. My motto is, you want people to read, start them young. You start them, telling an adult to read is probably not going to happen. Maybe they will read one book that you recommend and then give it up. But if you start this habit within your children, then what is going to happen is they will probably become readers for life.
Of course.
And that is why, we have to capture these teachers and we have to tell them that start this reading habit within the children. Let them not read only school ka academic books. उसको पढ़ने से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. Today, degrees and all don't matter. Everybody gets marks. The thing that you need to do is have this holistic kind of development, and literature is a very important part of your personal growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have from Vish sir is there, Vish Dhamija. He is author of some very excellent.
I know. Vish is a good friend. We troll each other a lot.
And he has written बहुत questions and questions. So Vish sir, please feel free to write your questions and we will be more than happy to take them up. And I'm
लिखो Vish, आपके questions सब welcome है. I will take all your questions.
So, I'm just calling to see if we have more questions or anyone, all those who are watching, please feel free to write the questions. And
someone has said like people refuse to learn about horror and life after death. So yes, that is true. We feel that horror is something that we should not talk about, and but I think this is not correct. We should talk about fear. We should talk about our phobias, because if you are not talking about these fear and phobia and things that scare you, then you will be more scared of it, because it will remain unknown. Writing horror has made me brave. I say this at every event. I was a very cowardly child growing up. I was scared of everything. Though I used to read horror, but मुझे हर चीज से डर लगता था as a child. You know, and I was very imaginative. So I would think everything like दीवारों में भूत है, ये है, वो है, everything. You know, my mind used to work that way. And as a child, I did not speak about these things to anyone. So that horror kept on festering within my mind. But now when I'm writing it, it's like kind of relaxation, venting out.
Right.
So things, I become braver now. I don't get scared of all these things. So I think we should talk about it. We should talk about life after death. Why not? Why not? We are all going to die. We should take death as a very practical thing. Maybe death is a good thing. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next stage. Maybe it's just a milestone in our life, and we don't know what's there on the other side of milestone. Maybe that's the only thing.
Certain. And so there's a question from Gaming with Ash. How do you explain black magic as well as occult experiences to a person who does not believe in it, or rather does not know about it?
This is a very, though we say black magic is a very gray area, because, you know, to be very honest, we must not, I think, lay great stock in people like, you know, tantrics and ojas and all. I don't, babas and all, because most of those people, वो लोग सिर्फ दुकान चला रहे हैं अपनी, you know, like, and they are also taking advantage of the people's gullibility, their belief, their faith. So I will never advise anybody to, like, you know, for example, call a tantric in your home if you think that there is a bhoot activity or something like that, a paranormal activity. So black magic is something that this is where I draw the line. Like, okay, that I don't believe in. See, ghosts, spirits are there. Maybe their afterlife is there. But is tantric cult, occult, you know, is that the way to go to it, to that side? Now that is where the gray area starts. How do you know that, you know, एक ये ritual करने से या ये ritual करने से हम भूतों से बात कर सकेंगे? How do you know that?
Right.
How do you know that? That is kind of a very commercial kind of aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Even in the West, not just in India, this is throughout. Like things like the Ouija board. The Ouija board is used to call ghosts, but you know, that's just a game. So black magic is something that I don't think we should fall prey to, because that is not something that a lot of Indians do that, because there were mentions of yajnas and all that, you know, in the scriptures also. So we believe that that works, but I don't think people are taking advantage of it. And this is also going on in some spaces. I'll not name them, very controversial, but in some places, you know, these tantrics and all, they say that is aurat mein bhoot hai, mere paas bhejo, and then they do something with the woman which is unspeakable. We know about such things. We don't talk about those things, but we do know about such things. So this all happens only because we have blind faith, which I think should be erased.
Absolutely.
So that is one thing that must happen. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So this is not a question, it's a compliment. Again from Gaming with Ash, I love listening to you, Neil sir. You're full of passion and knowledge. Absolutely. I mean, after having this interaction, I completely agree. You're full of passion as well as knowledge.
Thank you so much. Knowledge ka pata nahi, passion to definitely I have.
Of course. Okay. And
knowledge, we are all in process of acquiring as much as we can.
That's true. Okay, so there is another comment from Krish Ganga. An astrologer's day, R.K. Narayan playing on vulnerability.
Yes. I vaguely remember the story, and yes, it is. I think that's a very important theme in Indian literature. And I remember a lot of other stories also where people like people whom we have faith in take advantage of our faith.
Exactly.
So even
that happens.
This happens.
All right. So I think we are on top of time. It's 6 o'clock, and I think there's one last comment. Gaming Dash. Thank you, Neil sir and Abhishek sir, for answering my question. Honestly, made my day. Well, thanks for asking the questions, and as in Neil will answer all the questions. So
thank you so much.
No further questions. I think we can call it a day. Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining the session. It was a wonderful interaction. And
if I may have a last word.
Thank
you for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me, because I have seen you on Twitter. I've seen you on Instagram. Not just before you invited me, but even before that, Books
Right.
Wale Bhaiya has been doing a good job,
Yeah.
and it takes something out of you, because when we have all these author conversations, these lives and all, we are not doing it for any other profit or anything like that. We are just
Right.
doing it because we love literature and we
Love it.
love people. We just want to bring good books and good authors to each other, to for the
Right.
readers to know about it. So whenever there is an event like this, please attend, please listen to the authors. It
Yeah.
makes our day also.
Oh, of course. Of
So
course.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing it also, Abhishek. Yeah, these kinds
Thank
of
you.
activities.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. It was really quite generous on your part. And well, thanks again for thank you to all the audience who came and watched this session. And all the best, Neil, for all your future books.
Thank you so much. All the best to you also and to everyone listening to us today. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Good. Bye bye.